Hey there, it's Corey from Massdriver. Just wanted to do a quick end-to-end of going from nothing in Massdriver to having deployed infrastructure using OpenTofu and Checkov. So we're going to go through the entire bundle development process. We'll kind of touch on some of the key terms in Massdriver like bundles and artifact definitions, as well as review the Massdriver catalog as a way of managing all the resources for configuring your developer portal and orchestration. So the Massdriver catalog is just a public open source repo on the Massdriver-cloud GitHub repo. It is essentially a catalog of pre-built infrastructure abstractions. There's no real infrastructure as code inside of them. They're all Terraform random pets or OpenTofu random pets, but they give you a really good idea of how the different building blocks of Massdriver snap together. And so you can kind of take them, publish them to your instance, start to design what you want your experience to look like in Massdriver, and then just fill in your Terraform when you're done. Yeah, you can check that out at massdriver-cloud/massdriver-catalog. I've already got it cloned locally, and let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing you're going to need to do in Massdriver once you publish your catalog, you're going to have a number of clouds that we integrate with. I think you might get 4 by default: Azure, AWS, GCP, and Kubernetes. All of Massdriver's cloud integrations are customizable. And so when you look in the catalog, you'll see that there is a platforms directory. And by default, we only turn on about 4 of these. But you can come in here, you can click on any one of these Massdriver YAML files in here, and you can essentially customize and build out what the portal looks like over here. So this schema that you see here for Azure defines the form and how we're going to capture that information and validate that information. And you can also do things like include markdown instructions on how to find the data that you want to put into these fields. So if it's like, hey, we're signing up for Azure, we're putting in Azure credentials for some of our developers, this just kind of walks your teammates through how to get those credentials. And again, this works for any cloud: Snowflake, AWS, GCP, etc. Whatever your Terraform, OpenTofu, or infrastructure as code tooling supports, we support. There's also a couple other fields that we'll see here, or you see here. We'll come back to those in just a minute. So I've got this platform pushed up. I've already added a sandbox credential. I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make a project called API to-dos. API to-dos. And just a real quick note on the slug right here. So this is a friendly identifier for your project. It essentially lets you define a unique phrase to associate to a project, and now you can use that phrase as your actual identifier. So instead of us giving you an integer or a big UUID, it's just a short little abbreviation you can use to refer to this project. And we'll kind of hierarchically scope these as we build environments. We'll see that in just a second. Hit submit to create this project. And the first thing Massdriver wants to do is say, hey, what's the initial environment that you want to build out for this? So I'm going to say I'm just going to build a staging environment, and you can see it's starting to do this scoping here. So I have API to-dos -staging. So that's how I can access it from the API, CLI, etc. Go ahead and hit submit, and I'm sitting here on a canvas. So the first thing I'm going to do is dismiss this maintenance banner because we're doing a big migration at the end of the month. But I'll go ahead and click this. I'll select Azure Service Principal, and I can see that I've got a credential that my team's given me access to that I can assign to this canvas. Now, anything I put on this canvas is going to be provisioned and managed with that credential in whatever account that credential is associated with. So you can have different credentials from your staging environment than, let's say, from a production environment. You can assign those credentials individually and set the scale individually. So let's go ahead and get something published to the canvas. So I'm going to go ahead and look at this Azure storage account. So we're just going to build a real simple storage account and serverless application today. We'll look at this storage account, and this is a Massdriver bundle. I'll go ahead and open the Massdriver YAML file, but we'll kind of talk about this as a bundle first, and then we'll look at the configuration file. So what is a bundle? In Massdriver, bundles are infrastructure as code plus your policy as code tooling. You can see we're using Checkov here, plus your workflows. If you scroll down to the bottom here, you'll see my workflows right inside of here in one. And so instead of building shared Terraform modules that have to be composed together in some root modules someplace and then paired with some pipelines to execute those root modules in Massdriver, you just have shared modules or child modules and you just publish them. So just the core concepts. This is Postgres, this is a network, this is a Kubernetes cluster, this is how we run a Lambda. You publish it to Massdriver, And your canvas is actually your root module and your workspaces. If you're using Terraform, this is going to make a production and a staging workspace. Now, the cool thing with Massdriver is we can orchestrate multiple tools on the same canvas. So this workspace could be OpenTofu, Bicep, and Helm mixed together. Maybe different teams are using different tools amongst your platform team. So we have this regular Terraform here. We have this Massdriver YAML file that lets you put additional constraints on it. So if we look at this Terraform over here, we're going to have a variable called region that's a string in Terraform. But I want to make sure my developers are going to certain regions, right? And so what Massdriver lets you do is put these additional constraints on top of it. I can say, yeah, it's a string, but I want it to be an enum. So this is just JSON schema. This is an exact replica of your Terraform or Helm variables, right? Massdriver will keep this in sync for you. But you can see here, I'm just saying, hey, you know what? The region is required. That came from my Terraform constraints. But I'm going to say, hey, you know what? It has this additional constraint. It has to be in this enum. This can actually come dynamically from other places, which we'll see in just a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and publish this. I'll do mass bundle development publish. I'm going to switch over to the staging environment, and I did a development release. We have two release channels in Massdriver. There's stable and there's development. Using development for testing as an operator, platform team DevOps is really great. It allows you to do a lot of really cool stuff like rapid testing. Massdriver automatically supports auto upgrades of anything that's in the channel. You can be in a channel or not. It's up to you as the person designing your canvas, how you want to trust the barrier between you and your ops team, or I guess the boundary between you and your ops team. But we'll go ahead and add that storage account. We can see what that looks like here. So I'm going to go ahead and call this database. Database. And so you can now see that I could reference this database here as, you can see the full ID here, API to-dos -staging database, and this is how I'd use it in the CLI or API. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put this on one of these release channels so you can see what this looks like. I'm going to go ahead and throw it on the latest release channel, and I'm going to take development releases just because I'm using a development release. Wouldn't typically suggest this for your developers, but just kind of filling you in what's going on here. So now, from Massdriver's side, I can come in here and I can configure. So you can see here I've got this drop down. This is my Terraform variables. It's keeping me in check where I can deploy this thing. Okay, I'm a developer. I'm going to go into US East 1. Names required. I can go ahead and hit deploy. And I dragged one box out onto the canvas, hit deploy, and I got a storage account. I didn't ask anybody for credentials. I didn't ask them how to get the Terraform plan, scans, whatever to run. Just dropped it on the canvas. I'm good to go. So while that's provisioning, I want to show you some more stuff about Massdriver. So on the right side here, you can see that this is going to output a storage account. So this is telling you the type that's going to come out. We're going to be able to connect this to other infrastructure in just a minute. Let's first go ahead and publish another bundle so we can see what these connect and what they look like. So we'll go to Azure Function App, Mass Bundle Publish Development. Put a development one of these in here as well. Come over here, grab this Function App now. And I'll call this REST API. REST API. There we go. I'll just call this endpoint. So it'll be my actual endpoint. You can see that my REST API requires a storage account. If I come over here and I look at this Azure Function App, you can see that I've got these concepts, these connections and artifacts down here below params. So the parameters are the fields that you want to expose to your developers for your developers to interact with. The connections and artifacts are how you can kind of push information between these workflows so developers don't have to think about it, right? So real simple one here, we're looking at this REST API. We've got two. We've got an Azure Service Principal. That's coming from right here. We don't see a line because we, in the service principal config, we said, hey, don't show this as a line. It always wants to be an environment default. So we don't see that. That automatically gets routed for the developer. They don't have to think about it. The other one is they need the storage information, right? So normally you're kind of pinging somebody saying, hey, where can I get this ID? You're copying and pasting it from one place to the other. In Massdriver, you can just route this from one workflow to another. These can be different IAC tools. And the way that this is received shows up as a variable. So if you look at this Azure Function App and we look at the source code here, in this Massdriver variables here, you'll see that it receives this storage object. And this is the same shape as this artifact definition that we defined earlier. So we're actually able to push this information from one module to the other. And if we look at this really quick here, sorry, I accidentally closed it. There we go, Azure, nope. Let me move my face out of the way. There we go. You see the storage object, we're actually passing all this information through. So the developer never has to think about any of the storage account. They just route the information, and Massdriver takes care of routing all of that into a Terraform variable for you. So now over here as a developer, I can say, okay, I want to do US East 2 or East US, and you can see this storage access policy, read and write. This is actually dynamic. This is coming from the storage account. It's pushing information across this pipeline. You can see this policy information is coming across this line. And if I look at this Massdriver YAML here, you'll see that instead of having an enum hard-coded in there with JSON schema, I can use one of these Massdriver annotations into enum, and I can actually dynamically read information, right? So I could be reading the subnets. Somebody pick the subnets maybe they want to put a database into. I can do IAM policies. Pretty much anything that you need to pass from one place to another, you can do that, and you can actually turn it into drop-downs so developers can interact with that data as it's coming through. Another really great way of doing this is, or using this is, for transmitting maybe secret manager IDs from like your databases to applications, right? And so it just transmits the ID across, and your application can fetch the credentials. So let's go ahead and put this application on, I think I did a release channel or a development release for this as well. So let's go ahead and put this on a development release. There we go. And let me just refresh really quick so I can get a new version of this form. And so you can see now I'm ready to deploy this app. So let's go ahead and do massdriver-cloud/to-do API. Use the latest tag. I'm going to say I need write access to this database. And I can say initial deployment, right? And so I've just dragged an application out, or a little serverless function out. I said, hey, here's the image that I want you to serve from that thing. I need write access to the database that I'm going to be using, and I'm done. My application is going to get staged. It's going to be running in a minute, and I can access it. When I'm ready to replicate it to production, I can come over here, I can click production. I can grab another credential my team's assigned to me, maybe for a production environment, and then I can walk through and I can do that same deployment. I can even put my production environments on stable releases. Maybe I want to opt into development releases for my lower environment, so I can actually make sure that what the operations team is releasing is going to work with my production environment. But in my production environment, maybe I want to be on these stabler release channels. So I'll go back and show one last thing here. One other part that you can customize in Massdriver is not only the ability to push these artifacts through, and so you can see right here, this is actually visualizing some of these artifacts, so I can see some of the data here, which is very helpful for me as a developer, trying to see the IDs for my resources, or maybe the URLs for accessing one of the servers. But if you look along the top here, you'll see there's a number of other options. There's monitoring, you can tie in your alerts, there's a history of all your deployments. Here's the guide, and so you can see the guides are operator guides and runbooks that actually do full interpolation. So this uses mustache templating, and everything that's available in your canvas can be interpolated into these guides. So you can do really rich things like give developers copy-pastable examples of how they can run commands, right? So not only can I self-serve infrastructure, I can tie in, my operations team can tie in alerts so I can quickly troubleshoot infrastructure, and then I can have runbooks to help me through day 2 in troubleshooting. So I'm trying to give developers that full self-service experience. And so if we look at this operator guide here, we'll see it's just regular old Markdown with some mustache templating, and you can access your artifacts, you can access parameters, you can even access the outputs of your module. So you can say like, hey, here's the address of this service, if you want to be able to tie in and show like the links in Massdriver, so you can click and hop directly to a service or its documentation. So that's about everything you need to know about Massdriver. So you'll see that we didn't really touch much infrastructure as code. It just works with your infrastructure as code. You drop it in a directory, you put a Massdriver YAML file in there, and effectively all you have to do, first time, Massdriver will be able to pull in all those variables, populate this params YAML, you come in and put your additional constraints down. You say what you do and don't want to pass through the automation system by making them these artifacts, and add those in here, and then you set your steps. And so your operations team will push a number of steps up. Usually they tie these to a specific provisioner like OpenTofu, and this will have all of your tooling inside of it and all of your workflows. So I can just say, hey, you know what? Run this source code in OpenTofu, and I never have to see pipelines. What's really nice about this also when you think about day 2, I manage this from one place as an operations engineer. I come in here and I say, hey, you know what? The next version of this module, we want to bump it to OpenTofu 1.14, and we want to move to Sneak. I do that in one place, push it out, and when everybody upgrades to the next version of this module, they get upgraded to the new tooling. I don't have to chase 100 pipelines around and developers around trying to get them to upgrade their upgrade their versions that they're using. So hope that was helpful. If there's any questions, I'm always available on the Slack, Massdriver Community Slack, Corey, and I'm also available via email, Corey@massdriver.cloud. Feel free to drop me a line. Thanks so much.